I believe that creativity is the force of life itself.
Oh,
So if there is a dream put in your heart, you can achieve it. It may be really hard work and it may take years or decades, but if it's something you know you have to do, you must begin. To me, that's what makes it exciting.
hi everyone, Victoria Ali here. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. And I'm excited that my friend Katherine Robertson Pilling is here. She is a creativity and strategic coach and life coach and has been helping so many people for many, many years in accomplishing their projects and getting a dream and making it happen and being able to harvest the fruits of your work. Creativity is basically the core of the opportunity we have here as human beings. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Katherine Robertson Pilling. Katherine, thank you so much for being here. I'm honored to have you here. You're a longtime friend and colleague of mine, and I have really enjoyed the benefit and the gift of being able to participate in your workshops, in your courses, in your virtual studio day, which I'm a huge fan of, and kind of being able to come up with a dream that you think might be far-fetched and be able to put it to practical feat, working through you and your program, and especially dealing with some of the internal barriers that come up through that process. But first, would like to get you to tell us more about yourself and a little bit of history, and then we can dive in.
Oh, thank you, Tori. It's really nice to be here and great to have a transformational conversation with you. So I am a strategic creativity coach. I'm Katherine Robertson Pilling. And so I work with people who are either going through life change or have some sort of a creative vision. Now, they may not see it as creative, but a dream that they are still seeking to fulfill. That can be a creative project, it can be a business vision, and it can just be, I need to do something different in my life. I don't know what it is. I work with people using the framework that I created called the Wheel of Creativity, both in private coaching sessions, in various online programs, and very occasionally a live in-person session.
Well, you've helped so many people over the years. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Wheel of Creativity itself, your system, just a brief overview of it? And then we'll dive into some of the reasons why people reach out to you, which is they get to a frustration point sometimes, whether it's a creative project. Like myself, I reached out, I was writing a book at the time. And of course, we've worked on personal finance in the past. And what I really know to be true is that not only did working with you help with my book authoring, but it also helped with my business. And that was really important. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about that Wheel of Creativity.
Yeah, this is a very battered copy of the book, but it gives
Yes.
you a visual image of the wheel. And basically, it's a framework for the process of personal transformation. It is a 12-stage journey from what I call hunger, which is just that vague sense that you have deep in your gut that something's missing, something's wrong, something needs to change, even if you don't know what it is. And then you follow through 4 quarters and 12 stations, the journey of really the hero's journey of leaving the familiar, leaving the status quo, seeking in search of this thing you can't even quite identify yet. And you go through all those stages and finally return home with what it was you hungered for in a harvest. And that could be a book, it could be a business, it could be moving to a different country, it could be a new relationship. People stay stuck, stay in the status quo of their lives, some people for their entire lives. And a bit of a map of the process to say, you may not see all of that journey. You may only know that something's got to change, but there is a road and you can follow it, because I believe that creativity is the force of life itself.
Oh,
So if there is a dream put in your heart, you can achieve it. It may be really hard work and it may take years or decades, but if it's something you know you have to do, you must begin. So that's a bit of a wander there, but
No, that was very direct and informative. And having been through your Wheel of Creativity myself several times, I can tell you that it was very magical to me to realize that there is a path. Like you said, that there are things that if you're going to take a big risk and leave home for some big vision or a
Yeah.
dream, then there are some things you're going to encounter most likely along that path. And
Right.
then getting through those challenges, which are for me tend to be very internal types of challenges, those
Mhm.
voices in my head, particularly, and validating my process. Who do you think you are?
So it can be very reassuring to people to know that there is a journey, there's a path. And I've identified 12 stations of that path, which are predictable. They may not be perfectly linear, but so let
I
me,
can't hear enough about the Wheel of Creativity, by the way.
okay. Basically, the Wheel of Creativity is this map of the creative process, but it's also the map of the process of personal transformation. Because I see creativity not as a hobby or not as art or music or all these kind of judgments that we've used to, in fact, trivialize the power of the process of life itself. That is what creativity is. And it's something that we are born with. It's inherent. If you're breathing, you're creative. And what you choose to do with that determines the quality of your life, determines the outcomes of the dreams and visions that have been laid on your heart. And the map that I've outlined, this framework, follows the hero's journey. It is the journey of leaving the status quo, knowing only there is something more than this. Yes, there's doubt, there's paralysis, there's setbacks, all these things that we think, sometimes we use those things to call ourselves a failure, when in fact they really mean you're human and you're engaged. And so that kind of longing or that sense that something's missing is what I call hunger. And that's the start of the creative cycle and the start of the process. And when you come all the way around it, you come back to the very final station is harvest. So you harvest what you hungered for yourself, and you go through this journey and you come back home with what you needed. But the thing about it too, and this is where I see you so stepping up to the plate, Toria, is that when you harvest what you longed for, that harvest is something you share with your community and you share with the world. And so when we censor those longings that we feel and say, who am I? I have this thing I call little Kathy Robertson syndrome. It's like about a 5-year-old of who am I to do this? Who are you not to? And in fact, each time those ideas are censored, the world is a poorer place. The world really needs solutions today. And it's a journey. The process of creating that thing is what makes you the person who can do it. You don't start out there. That's why it is also the path of personal development.
Very well said. And I resonate so much with how you describe the process because my personal example is my life actually got so good because of a lot of self-help, a lot of work, and different things in my life. And I got to a point where I ended up marrying my soulmate. And that was my trigger point to say, you know what? Things are so good for me now. I never
Mm.
expected it to get to this level in my life that I need to give back somehow. And that was my hunger. I felt like I couldn't not do something. And
Yes.
that's when I came to you and participated in your workshops and your monthly meetings and the virtual studios and everything. And I have to say that you are absolutely right on. All you have to know is there's something inside of me. I'm hungry and there's something important I need to do. What is the form it's going to take? And I can retake this wheel and this process for any other projects as well, which is incredible.
Absolutely.
But I'll tell you what was amazing to me is I didn't have to know my entire journey just to get started. And then as I got through it, what was also fascinating to me about your hero's journey and your system is that automatically, when I reached another point, it just seemed like your system picked it right up. I had excitement and I was enthusiastic, and then I hit pitfalls where I was so scared. One of the funny things is I think I always struggled against thinking whether I was creative or not. I didn't think I was, or those voices and everything.
Yeah.
And what you're telling me is true. And I think we really need it in the world right now and society with all the changes happening. And my experience definitely was very surprising because some of the things I thought were going to be challenging to me weren't as challenging to me as some of, for instance, the business aspects and putting myself actually out there. There were some pieces of the puzzle that were actually really physically difficult for me because I
Mm,
was so afraid to put my work out there. And I think
mm,
that there are things like that you don't anticipate. And then when you have the point where you know there's going to be a harvest, it's incredible because it's like, oh, if I just keep going and don't stop and follow this process, I
mhm.
will be able to complete and launch and land whatever it is that I have in my heart. And so I think that it's empowering. So I'm excited to hear more about what brings people to you. What are some of the things you find overall?
It's interesting because people come to me at various times in their lives. I work with a lot of people right now who are in the second half of life, and they have had careers or they've had lives, and then it's okay. Like a woman said to me recently, she said, "Has my ship sailed? Should I just give up now and stop and be a grandmother?" And I felt so sad to hear that. And yet the question that came up for me was like, yes, it sailed. Where are you headed? It's like this sense of
That's
like
neat.
the ship sailed without me, or the ship is sailing and I'm on it, and where are we going?
I
You know,
love it. I
and
love it.
yeah, I think we all, no matter what stage of life, for young people too, starting out, I work with people who are in their 30s and in the corporate world who are trying to navigate their way and figure out what kind of life they want to have and how they want to show up, how they want to be held. And we all have those anxieties and insecurities and things that we have to push through, move through, like you were describing in your own journey. And in my journey too, my goodness, the only reason I know a little bit about this is because I've been through all of it. And to be honest, I still go through it. This is being alive. So I work with musicians, I work with visual artists, writers, people with an entrepreneurial vision. So they're really good at their craft, but they need to market it, and nobody wants to market. And yet it is a good chunk of any success story. It's like finding your audience. And you talked about the different stages of the process. It's like just to create your dream that's just the first cycle. It's like then there's like in my book, for example, there was the writing of the book, there was the editing of the book, there was the printing of the book, and then the publishing, and then the marketing, and then building the community around it. And so every one of those is a creative cycle, and you go through those challenges no matter where you are in the process. And I think it's the journey of being alive. And I was talking with some women this morning about this sense that you're going to learn it all in life and then you can coast, or you're going to graduate or whatever. And my feeling was, what is life for if not the process of learning and growing and what's new and discovery? To me, that's what makes it exciting, but it's not for everybody.
So you were talking earlier before we started the podcast about four different areas that people either struggle with or pain points, because I think a lot of people might give up when they start to feel these pain points. And so I wanted to see if you could outline some of those that are typical if you're either dealing with a creative project or even in my case, an entrepreneur, a business.
Sure. Each quarter in the wheel of creativity, there's vision, there's exploration, there's incubation, and there's cultivation. And they represent a phase of the process. And each of those kind of has a particular challenge in it, a particular setback. When you're coming up with the idea, you can get stuck in your head. You can analyze something to death, literally, so that you never actually get out of the gate. You keep trying to perfect your idea. And that can lead to a sense of paralysis. a sense of inertia. You're just stuck. I talk about in that quarter, one of the stations I call anorexia, which is that not about food, but it is that sort of compulsive avoidance of that which you know you need to do, that which nourish you, that which gives you pleasure and joy. And it's a habit that we're in. We're very workaholic in our society. And so we can perfect ourselves into a corner. And that's really getting stuck in the idea and never taking action, never moving beyond that. Another one in the next phase, it's in the exploration phase. It's really about taking your idea out into the world and seeing what else is out there. And as you leave the status quo and leave what you know in your life and what's familiar, it's very common to hit a point of kind of despair. Gosh, why did I leave my day job? Who did I think I was? And keep circling around in the sea and never finding the next shore that you're looking for. And the solution there, the challenge is to stay focused and to not let yourself be distracted by, in the hero's journey, it would be the sirens calling to you from the rocks. And another one is just doubt. I have a little thing on my wall. Sylvia Plath said something like the greatest enemy of creativity is self-doubt. You just have to go through that. It is the part of the process because you hit a point where you're doing all this work and you're working really as hard as you can and you can't see anything happening. And so it's really easy to just doubt. You doubt yourself, you doubt the process. And so the challenge there is to really dig deep and find the faith to keep going. And as I see it, each time you go through the cycle and you see there's that point again, there's that doubt again, but it's familiar now that there is something beyond this. So that gives you the faith to keep going. And then finally, the one that I call it fatigue, it's just like the willingness to go the distance, the energy to keep going, because the creative process, the business process, whatever it is in your life that you're trying to create, it requires trial and error. In tech, they call it iterations. It requires many iterations to get it to where it's actually a functional, it's a new life, or it's a book, or whatever it is that you're working on. So there is a solution for every one of these things. The solution is just to stay in the process, to get the support that you need, not to give up. And eventually, as you keep going, you are transformed by this process.
Now, that is something I'd like to speak to is the last two stages that you discussed, the self-doubt and the persistence and continuing to go when you don't feel like it anymore and you're
Mhm.
fatigued and you're like, this is never going to end. I want to tell you that by participating in your groups and also the virtual studio day, that explain the virtual studio day, because I'll tell you what, the times when I had the deepest self-doubt and I would actually take those doubts, that was my topic when I would come to your virtual studio or day. I would pick the
Yeah.
toughest thing and I would just be, I would be transparent about it in the group. And I was just amazed.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's something, it's like a little magical shell there. I design all my programs around 4 pillars, which I think dovetail with these doubts and with the things that you need to find to keep going through the process. And they are structure, accountability, support, and community. And the virtual studio day is one of the programs. It's a very tight container to get work done. So it's a 4-hour co-working session. At the top of every hour for 10 minutes, we check in. That means we come and share our goals for that session. We share what we might have gotten done or didn't get done in the previous session, and then go back to work. So everybody brings their own independent project and work on it independently. But the amazing thing is that everybody's cycling together, going through the process together, and hitting those places where you didn't get done what you wanted to, or what you thought you could, or you got stuck, or you went down a rabbit hole. And you know what? You just pop back up and go back to it. And it's a real kind of discipline, but in a very compassionate container where people really do peel back the veil and are human together. And so it's a very powerful, it's great to hear your feedback on it, that you brought the tough stuff, because I think that's where it works for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And your entire process to me is interesting because it exists and you're able to capture it and pull it together in a real practical way. The creativity and how to get through these things, it's like a muscle. It's like working with you. My experience was it was like creativity is not impossible. It's just you need to learn what it involves, what the process is, and then be able to exercise that muscle. And then
Mm.
the more times you actually face, like that, I actually faced some of those doubts or some of the fatigue, the fears that came up about safety of my private space versus putting my work out there. That's a big
Yeah,
leap. But it's interesting to me that some of the times what I witnessed is people actually just needed to clean their desk. It was so
yeah.
funny. It wasn't just, okay, what's happening in this story or whatever. It was actually some of these more practical things. But I don't know that we get like structured training. Maybe in the old days, people did apprenticeships around how to actually complete projects in general, not even just creative, but Stephen King talks about that too. You show up every day at this time, inspired or not. And I think that's
Absolutely.
where there's a lot of confusion. Talk about that for just a moment. Where does inspiration fit in the creative process? Because everybody thinks, at least I used to, that was what creativity was.
Right. Yes. It's interesting. I'd like to just circle back to your use of the word muscle, because I always talk about there are two principles in the creative process, and they line up with yin and yang, or masculine and feminine, and they are active and receptive. And I liken them to having a bicep and a tricep. And we all lead with one or the other. Either we are super productive people and we get a lot done, we know how to do that, but we never can make space to sit back and receive ideas. Or typical of really creative people is, I can just sit here and generate ideas until the cows come home, but actually seeing it through and completing something is really hard for me. And so everybody leads with one or the other, but you must have both in order to have a full and successful creative process. And so the virtual studio day is the container for getting the work done. It's pushing the creative person to be productive, but also those people who are super productive must make space. And I mean, time, close the door, turn off the phone, to sit and listen and receive ideas. And people who think they're not creative are often people who just never make that time and space, because we are all receivers as well as producers. So I really look at having a daily practice that includes mindfulness, meditation, journaling, maybe. And one of my most powerful tools for myself when I was writing my book is just, I just call it the first hour of the day. That's where you put your creative project. Because if you don't do it the first hour, an hour goes, the third hour goes, and by the time you're putting your head on the pillow at night, you never got to it. So inspiration and discipline work hand in hand. And
Yes, yes, that's
about inspiration.
fantastic. That's really helpful. And I think right now, in my opinion, it's so important for people to be learning this type of a process because in the past, we've all been able to go to work, for instance, and just work at a certain job, and maybe it's computer programming or maybe it's welding. And so, what we're finding now with the changes going on in industry, with artificial intelligence coming on and with robotics coming online, these things are going to be changing the workforce more than we know, quicker than we know. In fact, I'm already using quite a few artificial AI
Mhm,
tools
mhm.
in my work,
Yeah.
and it saves a lot of time. And I think there may be some fears out there about what do we do next? And I know my husband and I have this theory that we're going from the information stage into the economy of meaning, which is what you're work is all about, is helping people take the meaning that they have and turn it into something they can share with the community. I personally believe that learning to do the types of work and using the muscles and creativity that you do are actually pivotal and vital for the younger people in particular that might be facing some unemployment as some of these tools come online. I've talked
Mm,
to a computer programmer that's run into this. I've talked to other
mm,
people in technical, like marketing media, things like that. I think that everybody is trying to cut corners. In any case, the
yeah.
reason why I'm bringing this up is because I really think that people have waited for someone to tell them what to do. And I believe with your work, what I
Mm,
noticed is it's like I can think of what I might want to do. I can look around me and see, what does the world need? Does it need a painting? Does it need a, what do I feel drawn to do? But also, what do I see around me that people are needing? And
yeah.
so it could be building a greenhouse. I guess what
Mhm.
I'm trying to bring up is, how do you see creativity becoming more important, learning how to
Mm,
actualize dreams, in other words,
mm,
to the
yeah.
economy, even?
Yes, I agree with you. AI is not going away. In fact, it's probably going to move into our lives faster than anything we've seen move into our lives. For me, we must welcome that and embrace it and learn how to work with that, develop the skills to work with it, practice those things. But it also means, what is the thing AI can't do? AI will never be human. So what does humanity really mean? And young people today, I think that's not so obvious as it used to be. Some of the connections and the mentors and even parents, and it's like that direct connection and those relationships are just getting lost along the way. People are working hard, parents are working multiple jobs, and so we have to learn to look deep into ourselves to find our connection with what I call source, which is a non-religious term, but we do come from somewhere. And that is a thread that connects us from a very practical, what do I have to do right now, to eternity.
Mm.
And the wheel, when you look at it in two dimensions, it's a wheel, but when you turn it on its side, it's a vortex. And its base is in what I call the pool of all that is. We are directly connected with all the ideas, everything that we need to contribute in the world and to survive as well. I've been studying intuition lately, and there's just a real sense that we are overwhelmed with analytical thinking, and
Mm.
we've lost that way of tuning in to all that is. We have access to it, but it means you have to go within. And the thing I think that often gets lost is people look at that and think that's woo-woo. In fact, it's the most practical thing you can do. If you develop your creative skills, your creative thinking skills, those are applicable to everything, no matter what situation you're in. And yeah, I tend to wax a bit esoteric on this, and I really appreciate that your question is so deeply practical. People are being confronted with really like very survival based challenges right now. But I still think the way through that is to dig deep into what makes you most human, to connect with other people. We have all sorts of economic terms for it, like networking and brainstorming and all these things. But at the end of the day, it's really about connecting with your source, connecting with yourself, and connecting with other people. And I guess I'm a bit passionate about that.
I really appreciate your passion because right
Mhm.
now, I think myself and others, it's really nice to hear this idea of, hey, we don't need to be in fear heading into the future or even our present. We can embrace that. But what we need to do is see the reality of, okay, this does invite me to go back into the inner part of myself. And actually, as you said, I believe that's probably the source of how we're going to get through this together.
Yeah.
And just simple ideas, buy local, look at your artwork nearby. What my husband and I do is everything we purchase, kitchen towels, anything at all, we try to think of functional art. We try to include beauty in our everyday life, including the way we
Mm.
prepare food and everything.
Right.
And I think that, like you said, it brings tears to my eyes in a way to think about the fact that it's really the jobs that we don't want to do that AI and robotics are taking over in some ways. And
Mm.
that if we can actually just be patient with ourselves and learn these things and look around and see what does my neighbor need? How can I? And I know I kind of talked a little bit about economics and jobs there for a minute, but I really believe
Yeah.
that digging deeper will help us innovate
Mm.
and iterate, as you said
Absolutely.
earlier, and that will just bring more prosperity to everybody on the planet. And that I also believe that each person has the creativity, as you said, and that if they are just willing to tap into what makes their hearts sing, and then
That,
how can they make a living at that? And I talked to someone recently who decided to run for office, and I think she could use your program to get through some of the
yeah.
going home and harvesting. And in any case, what's funny is the more she got involved with some of these practices that are involved, she's like, that was so easy. And I think that's another clue, which is where is my heart singing? Getting creative, being open, and then
Yeah.
noticing that a lot of it is easy to do if you're on your own path, and that you can use these tools instead of as an enemy, as a support. And I'm sure a lot of fine artists, in fact, a lot of fine artists or a lot of artists, writers, musicians might be listening to this right now. You've worked with a lot of artists and musicians, and where do you think it breaks down where they're not able to actually make the living? Or do you think it's just personal finance? Do you think there's some little things that they could possibly do that they might not be thinking about? Is
Mm.
there any piece, if you're speaking directly to someone who considers himself to be an artist?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's two different skills. One is the skill of creation. It's a gift, it's a talent, yes, all those things. The other is the skill of business. You alluded to this earlier. And I work with artists who are not willing to make the necessary sacrifices to make money doing their art. That path is not for everybody because there are sacrifices to be made. I have two people that have been in my group for a couple of years now, and one of them is totally dedicated to the purity of her work, which is absolutely an honorable path, but she's confronting the pushback at actually what is the market looking for? What do people buy? What do they want to listen to? And it's a very personal question to ask yourself, is that the path I want to go down? Or do I just want to make what I find beautiful? And on the other hand is a man who has two tracks. Both tracks are in the music industry. One, he works with other people to make the money and make the living because that's where the money is. And the other is that he produces his own work, and he's very successful in both domains, but they're separate tracks. And yeah, I think we all long to make a living doing what we love. And there are times when maybe they could be two tracks side by side and support each other better. And again, that is a deeply personal decision that uh, is something that is well handled and navigated with private coaching sessions because that's your life path. You really have to make that decision for yourself.
Thanks for sharing about that, because I know that it can be so confusing. And I've seen some
Mhm.
musicians that I've been involved with years ago that were basically starving artists. However, I've also seen some very successful people in art that worked half time as a graphic designer or
Mhm.
worked half time as a professor teaching others art. And then basically what I've personally found is that if I can really be honest with myself about my financial goals, then that can help answer a lot of those questions. And that there are also tools out there that we can find. In fact, we have some on Everyone Counts. We have the MyFi course. Sometimes I think for myself, I was able to create more when I had the solid financial foundation. But then you find yourself living on cat food. And then you're like, okay, that's just an
Yeah.
example. I haven't actually lived on cat food. but,
It's
but,
a
but
lot of pressure.
yeah, but I think that for me, part of it is some people tend to do well with just one job. They're an animator, they're going for it,
Right.
and they're making the income with that position, and they're able to do some really strong, wonderful work. However, they have to do compromises in a team and commercial ventures that you don't have to do as a fine artist. And so I think it's wonderful to hear about your example of your participant in your program that's doing both
Mhm.
successfully. One is working with other people on collaborative projects that they are driving and you're supporting. And then the
Yes.
other being, hey, this is my personal project that I might get somebody to help me with.
Yeah.
But overall, having also that financial stability or just abundance feeling, because not
Mhm.
everybody has the same need for a yacht versus a small, tiny home.
Mhm. Right.
So this is so
Yeah,
helpful.
and, I think I wanna just say that the world is going through a huge overarching change. It didn't start with us, it started hundreds of thousands of years before us, and it will continue something will continue long beyond the time that we're here. And we get to choose who we want to be in that process. Do I want to say no to myself all the time and say I don't count? I love everyone counts. Or do I want to participate in co-evolving
Oh.
what we are going to live and what our children are going to live next? And to me, saying yes to your creative process, to your creative longing, to your life call is to be a co-evolver. And that's what my commitment is. And that's what I'm here to support people to do. And I know, Toria, that is what you guys are all about. So it's my pleasure to be here and talk with you today. Thank you for inviting me.
And tell us how people can follow you, or what would the next steps if they wanted to
Right.
find out a little bit more about your work. And we'll definitely post a link to your book in the comments
Thank
and
you.
anything else you think would be helpful to people.
Sure. Yeah. And I would invite people to check out wheelofcreativity.com. And that's probably the easiest website to remember. And feel free to reach out to me. There on that website are links to my blog, to my own podcast series, which I haven't updated in a while. Lots of ways that you can work with me, as well as lots of free things, free resources. I invite people to subscribe to my newsletter. It's just like a weekly thing I send out around a monthly theme to support the creative process. So this month was intuition, and next month, I don't know. Stay
And
tuned.
and you have the virtual yurt, which I have attended. Can you tell me
Yeah,
just briefly about that?
sure. The virtual yurt is a free, it's been free. I may change that, but it's a once a month Sunday centering session. We're on pause until September, but that is an easy way to come and participate. We have a little yurt background and it gives a feeling of being in a safe space. We have poetry and music and creativity. We do meditation, journaling, and sharing. I also run an online incubator, which will reopen in September as well. That is a way for people to get ongoing, every week, structured support in a community of people who are creating alongside you.
And I believe I was involved in the incubator, maybe before it was called the incubator.
Yes,
And
you
I have
were.
to say that was so helpful,
Yeah.
because the virtual studio days are really great for specific tasks that I'm trying to overcome
Yes.
or fears. But the
Mhm.
incubator, it was part of my business. It was part of my process, my accountability, learning from you, just different things that really helped to keep the ball rolling. I mean, people spend so much on education, And it's amazing to me that the kind of programs that you're doing could really yield a lot of return and value. They certainly did for me. And I continue to be a big fan of your programs and your process. So I will post your contact information at wheelofcreativity.com and look forward to staying in touch, Katherine, and having you back again.
Thank you, Toria. Thank you so much. It's really always a pleasure to chat with you. And I appreciate so much your interest, your belief in the Wheel of Creativity and the work that I do. And it'd be my pleasure to see you again.
Thank you.